What happens when the man who spent months angling for the crown sees the king without his armor? Solo Sikoa walked into a hospital room expecting to confirm a narrative. Roman reigns fallen, the path to the head of the table finally cleared, and instead found a picture that burned through every layer of bravado he'd built. Roman, bruised and bandaged after Braun Breaker's spear in Paris. Monitors beeping in a slow, stubborn rhythm. Family at his bedside in quiet vigil. It wasn't the terrifying tribal chief Solo had shadowed and challenged. It was a man shouldering pain with the same grit he once used to hold a company together. According to people in the room, Solo froze in the doorway, the look in his eyes trading defiance for dawning comprehension. He didn't posture. He didn't negotiate. He didn't reach for the imaginary crown. He inched forward like a cousin, not a challenger, searching Roman's face for the one thing that had always made the bloodline more than an angle. Proof that family is the point of the story, not the prop. In that quiet, the power struggle that once seemed inevitable suddenly felt small, and the stakes, blood, loyalty, legacy, grew massive. Solo Sikoa's reckoning. Solo's aura has always been economy. Few words, clean violence, a presence that told the room what time it was without needing a watch. But this reckoning required language he has rarely used. Reflection. He entered the hospital as the heir apparent, the enforcer who had proven he could break through walls and game plans alike. He left as something harder to categorize, a man staring down the cost of ambition. The image of Roman without the myth, the breath, the bruises, the bandages, pulled the mask off Solo's own motives and showed him a mirror he couldn't dodge. You could practically hear the calculus shift. What is a throne if you have to step over your family to sit on it? What is a legacy worth if it's written with your cousin's absence instead of his presence? Solo didn't announce a heel turn or a babyface reveal. He allowed himself to be human in a business that often punishes humanity. That's why the moment landed. The guy built on power saw the weight of it, and for the first time, the chase slowed down long enough to ask where it was taking him. The empire in pieces, and in reach since Paris, the bloodline hasn't been a faction so much as a set of open wounds. Jey Uso, the heartbeat of the story for years, has carried the kind of exhaustion only family can deliver. Loyalty tugging one arm, pride the other. Love in the middle tearing a seam. Jimmy, whose swagger used to light rooms, has been a quieter figure, eyes red around the edges. A silhouette that looks like grief standing upright. The phone in Paul Heyman's hand might as well be a chessboard, the screen lighting his face as he counts moves and contingencies. Seth Rollins has done what Seth Rollins does, smiling like a man who writes punchlines before the joke lands, stirring the pot and naming the era before the paint dries. Yet, for all that fracture, the hospital visit proved something crucial. Closeness is a door that only needs to be cracked once. The distance between broken and back can be one decision wide in this family, and Solo's decision, whatever it becomes, now feels like the hinge. The power or the blood? Every bloodline chapter eventually returns to the same question, whispered through steel and spotlight. What matters more, the crown or the crest? Solo's arc to date made the crown look inevitable. He carried himself like a storm with a schedule, an heir who would rather earn a throne by force than inherit it by decree. But the room with Roman changed the test. The crown is about elevation. The crest is about obligation. The crown says lead. The crest says protect. The crown asks who you are. The crest asks who you're for. If Solo stays on the path to kingship, he risks proving every criticism correct. That power is its own addiction, and family merely a ladder. If he pivots, he can do what few wrestlers ever attempt in the middle of a rise: trade destiny for duty and become more dangerous because his purpose is bigger than himself. Either choice will write the next year of WWE. The right choice could define the next era. The hospital room as story engine arenas make legends. Hospital rooms tell truths. Under bright lights and pyro, narratives can be sculpted into any shape required. Cheers sweetened by spectacle. Boos muffled by surprise entries and swerves. But sterility leaves no place to hide. There are no camera tricks when the only soundtrack is an IV drip and a cousin's breathing. There are no promos when the dialogue is eye contact and memory. That's why the account of Solo pausing in the doorway has already outperformed hours of television in fan chatter, because it reads as unscripted humanity inside a scripted world. Wrestling is at its best when it lets real emotions leak through the canvas without turning the moment into a stunt. Here, the setting did the heavy lifting. It stripped the gimmicks and made the stakes legible in a glance. Roman is a man. Solo is a man. Their last name is a pressure. Their bond is a promise. And a promise said softly travels further than a catchphrase shouted at full volume. Strings, shadows, and the external pressure stories. This big don't unfold in vacuums. They attract gravity. Paul Heyman is the gravity of opportunism. Always calculating. Always near the center without ever taking the first punch. If he's still guiding the bloodline, he'll frame Solo's hesitation as wisdom and Roman's recovery as a campaign. If he isn't, he'll find the next rising tide and pretend the moon answered to him. Seth Rollins is the gravity of chaos, an architect of messes who thrives on second-guessing. He wants the bloodline so busy managing internal weather that they forget there's a storm outside with his name on it. And then there are the blunt instruments. Braun Breaker, who already turned momentum into a missile once, and Bronson Reed, who doesn't need an invitation to be the wall you run into at the end of a hallway. External pressure compresses indecision, and Solo will feel it from every direction. Coaxing, taunting, promising. The difference after the hospital is that those voices now have to shout over the quiet one inside him that said family first. The call to Jay and Jimmy. Backstage whispers say Jay reached out before the visit and again after, pushing no agenda except the oldest one. Remember who we are. For years, Jay has been the bloodline's conscience, the guy who lets emotion hit first and then learns to stand up in the middle of it. If Solo chooses the crest, it will be Jay's voice he's echoing when he puts a hand on the table and says, "We, not me." Jimmy's role in the next act could be the surprise. Less flash now, more steel, a brother who has learned the hard way that silence is not surrender. It's setup. The Usos at half strength are a problem for anyone. Aligned, they're a metronome you can't break. Add Jacob Fatu's detonator energy, and the equation writes itself. A family that looked defeated on a stretcher becomes mathematically terrifying the moment it stands shoulder to shoulder again. The reunion path and its price. A heartfelt reunion makes for great thumbnails, and thumbnails don't win fights. If Solo chooses unity, the bloodline still has to navigate months of accumulated scar tissue, external sabotage, and the simple physics of timing. Roman's recovery, Jay's readiness, Jimmy's recalibration, Jacob's integration. They'll need a first strike that is surgical, not cinematic. Selective appearances, targeted interruptions. A message sent not with microphones, but with outcomes. War Games-style spectacle will always tempt a story this size, but the smarter path begins smaller. Trios that teach rhythm, tags that force trust, 6 mans that hide the healing while sharpening the edges. And they'll have to decide how to handle the one variable that always returns. Haman. If he's in, the strategy gains a brain. If he's out, the strategy gains clarity. Either way, unity requires choices, and choices carry price tags. The Bloodlines Bill, once a matter of championships, is now written in forgiveness and restraint. If Solo chooses the crown. Anyway, let's entertain the other fork for a beat, because drama lives in possibility. If Solo sees vulnerability and smells opportunity, if he walks out of the hospital convinced that the family needs a leader now and that he was born for the vacancy, the story turns from reconciliation to referendum. He'd have to make the case in public, the hardest venue for private pain. He'd need to beat names that matter in matches that matter, and do it with the kind of finality that says, "I'm inevitable." He'd have to look Jay in the eyes and ask him to accept a new gravity. Look Jimmy in the eyes and ask him to be a soldier again. Look Roman in the eyes and promise to keep the fire lit in his absence. The problem is that crowns taken in weakness burn hotter on the head. Every defense feels like a trial. Every loss like an indictment. And the first time he hesitates, at a microphone, in a hallway, at a bedside, audiences will hear the subtext. Did the heir seize the throne, or did the moment seize him? Why fans are all in. This angle doesn't trend because people love a swerve. It trends because people recognize a family conversation when they hear one. There's a universal in Solo's pause. Ambition meeting a line it swore it would never cross. Hurt meeting history. A hard man seeing the human he's tied to by blood and memory. Wrestling thrives on catharsis, and nothing delivers catharsis like the possibility that people might change when it counts. The comment sections aren't just fantasy booking, they're negotiating stakes. Redemption over revenge. Duty over ego. A table restored not because the leader demanded it, but because the family decided it was worth saving. Whether you're in it for the work rate, the war drums, or the whispered "we're still here," the road ahead offers all three. The road from here. What happens next is less about booking than bandwidth. Roman's timetable dictates tone. If he's back soon, the bloodline plays defense into offense. Contain the narrative. Gather the pieces. Pick the moment. Swing hard once. If recovery stretches, Solo becomes the bridge, not the boulder. Holding space, drawing lines, making it costly to stand across from that crest. Rollins will keep pressing psychology. Breaker will keep testing physics. Reed will keep daring someone to move him. And Haman, whichever logo he stands beside, will keep talking in parables that translate into plans. Watch the entrances, not the exits. Watch who accompanies whom. Watch whose music hits first and whose cuts last. The story will tell on itself if you know where to look. Final word, the choice that writes an era. Solo Sikoa's hospital visit didn't crown a champion. It crowned a question. Will he be the man who climbed over his family to sit on a throne, or the man who stood with his family so the throne still meant something when they got back to it? One choice extends a reign. The other defines a legacy. One earns a belt. The other preserves a name. In a business built on moments, this one felt like a hinge. Quiet, human, heavy, and hinges swing doors. If he chooses blood over power, the bloodline becomes more than a dominant act. It becomes a standard again. If he chooses power over blood, the feud becomes Shakespeare with super kicks, a tragedy we can't look away from. Either way, the next time Solo steps through a curtain, the building will be listening for the answer he already started to give when he paused in that doorway. Crowns glitter. Crests endure. The tribal chief will rise when he's ready. Between now and then, Solo Sikoa decides whether the story we tell about this era ends in a title defense or an oath kept.